Albert Fish was a name that haunted the streets of New York in the early 20th century. The man was unassuming, a thin, gray-haired gentleman with a kind smile that concealed the darkness within. Albert Fish was not just a vampire, he was a monster, a creature whose thirst for blood was matched only by his perverse appetite for human flesh. His preferred victims were children, the most innocent and trusting souls. Fish's methods were both cunning and horrifying. He would lure children away from their homes and families with promises of candy and toys, only to lead them into the shadows where his true nature revealed itself. The children never stood a chance against the creature in the guise of a kindly old man. One such case was that of little Billy Gaffney. Billy was only 4 years old when he vanished from his Brooklyn neighborhood. His parents searched frantically, but the boy was nowhere to be found. Weeks turned into months, and hope dwindled. It wasn't until a desperate mother, Mrs. Gaffney, received a chilling letter that the true horror began to unfold. The letter, written in a spidery, almost childlike scrawl, read, "Dear Mrs. Gaffney, I took your boy and brought him to a deserted house in Westchester. I stripped him naked and bound him hand and foot, gagged him with a piece of dirty rag I picked out of the dump. Then I burned his clothes, threw his shoes in the dump. Then I walked back and took the trolley to 59th Street at 2 a.m. and walked from there home. Next day about 2 p.m., I took tools, a good heavy cat of 9 tails, homemade, short handle, cut one of my belts in half, slit these half in 6 strips about 8 inches long. I whipped his bear behind till the blood ran from his legs. I cut off his ears, nose, slit his mouth from ear to ear, gouged out his eyes. He was dead then. I stuck the knife in his belly and held my mouth to his body and drank his blood. I could go on detailing the grisly acts that followed, but it is enough to say that his body was divided and cooked in a stew." Albert Fish. The police were horrified. The brutality and perversion detailed in the letter were beyond anything they had encountered. They launched a massive manhunt, and it wasn't long before they caught Albert Fish. Under interrogation, he confessed to numerous other abductions, murders, and acts of cannibalism, each more gruesome than the last. Fish's trial was a media sensation. The courtroom was packed with reporters and spectators, all eager to witness the proceedings. The defense argued that Fish was insane, driven by uncontrollable urges and delusions. Experts testified about his severe mental illness, his history of self-harm, and his bizarre fantasies. Despite this, the prosecution painted him as a cunning predator who knew exactly what he was doing. The jury was faced with a difficult decision. They had to determine whether Fish was a madman or a monster with full awareness of his actions. In the end, they found him sane and sentenced him to death. The public felt a sense of relief, believing that justice had been served. But the nightmares of Albert Fish's deeds continued to haunt the collective consciousness. Fish was sent to Sing Sing Correctional Facility to await his execution. As he sat in his cell, he continued to write letters, each filled with more confessions and sickening details of his crimes. He seemed to take a perverse pleasure in recounting his atrocities, as if reliving them on paper. The guards and psychiatrists who interacted with him were deeply unsettled by his calm demeanor and his complete lack of remorse. The night before his execution, Fish was given a last meal of steak and potatoes, which he ate with unsettling relish. He reportedly said, "I don't even know why I am here." The next morning, he was led to the electric chair. As the executioner prepared to flip the switch, Fish's final words were, "I don't know why I'm here, but I know why you're all going to hell." The room went silent as the lever was pulled, and Albert Fish was no more. However, the story does not end there. In the months following Fish's execution, strange occurrences began to plague the prison. Guards reported seeing shadowy figures and hearing whispers in the darkness. Prisoners spoke of a malevolent presence, an oppressive feeling that hung in the air. Some claimed to have seen Fish's spectral form wandering the halls, his eyes glowing with a sinister light. One guard, determined to uncover the truth, delved into Fish's writings and discovered a chilling passage that had been overlooked during the trial. In one of his letters, Fish had written about an ancient ritual he had performed, a dark incantation meant to bind his spirit to this world even after death. The guard realized with growing horror that Fish had intended to continue his reign of terror from beyond the grave. Desperate to stop the hauntings, the guard sought the help of a priest well-versed in exorcisms. Together, they performed a cleansing ritual within the prison, hoping to banish Fish's spirit once and for all. But as they recited the final prayers, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the candles and leaving them in darkness. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, and a low, guttural laugh echoed around them. The priest's voice trembled as he spoke. "The spirit is not banished. He is stronger than we imagined." The guard felt a chill run down his spine. "What do we do now?" he whispered. The priest's eyes were filled with fear. "We must find the source of his power. If we don't, he will never truly be gone." The guard knew that this was only the beginning. The true horror of Albert Fish had yet to be fully revealed. And somewhere in the depths of the prison, the vampire's dark legacy waited to be uncovered, a mystery that promised more terror and bloodshed. The guard and the priest steeled themselves for the battle ahead, knowing that the fate of countless souls hung in the balance. The story of Albert Fish was far from over, and the shadows whispered of a malevolence that refused to die. As the guard and the priest stood in the flickering candlelight, their resolve hardened. They knew they were facing a malevolence far greater than they had anticipated. The prison seemed to breathe with a life of its own, shadows dancing on the walls, whispers of the damned echoing in their ears. They had to find the source of Albert Fish's dark power before it consumed them all. The first step was to scour the prison for any hidden clues. They began their search in Fish's former cell, a cold, oppressive place that still carried his sinister aura. As they combed through the cell, the guard found a loose brick behind the bed. With some effort, he pried it open, revealing a hidden compartment. Inside were yellowed pages, covered in Fish's scrawled handwriting. The priest carefully unfolded the pages, his eyes widening as he read. Fish had meticulously documented his rituals, detailing the steps he had taken to bind his spirit to the mortal realm. The final page was the most disturbing, a detailed map of the prison, marked with occult symbols and cryptic notes. The heart of the dark ritual, it seemed, was a hidden chamber beneath the prison. Determined to end this nightmare, the guard and the priest followed the map to a seldom used section of the prison. They descended into the bowels of the building, the air growing colder and more oppressive with each step. Finally, they reached a rusted iron door, covered in symbols that matched those on the map. With a deep breath, the guard pushed the door open, revealing a small, stone-walled chamber. In the center of the room was an altar, covered in dried blood and surrounded by burnt-out candles. The air was thick with a foul odor, and the walls seemed to pulse with a dark energy. The priest began to chant, reciting prayers to cleanse the room of its malevolent presence. As the priest's voice echoed through the chamber, the shadows around them seemed to writhe and twist. Suddenly, the room grew colder, and a bone-chilling laugh filled the air. The guard and the priest turned to see a spectral figure emerging from the darkness. Albert Fish, his eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "You think you can banish me?" Fish's voice was a chilling whisper, filled with contempt. "I am beyond your reach. My power is eternal." The priest continued his chant, his voice growing stronger despite the terror that gripped him. The guard raised his flashlight, the beam slicing through the darkness and illuminating Fish's spectral form. But the light seemed to have no effect on the apparition, which advanced on them with an eerie grace. Desperate, the guard remembered the writings they had found in Fish's cell. He fumbled through the pages, finding a counter-ritual that Fish had mentioned in passing away to sever the ties binding his spirit. As he read the incantation aloud, Fish recoiled, a look of rage crossing his ghostly features. "No," Fish hissed, his form flickering. "You cannot undo what has been done." But the guard persisted, his voice steady as he recited the words. The priest joined him, their voices merging in a powerful chant. The air around them crackled with energy, and the shadows seemed to retreat. Fish's form wavered, his eyes burning with hatred. "You will pay for this," Fish snarled. "You cannot stop me. I will return." With a final, thunderous roar, Fish's spirit was torn from the chamber, the dark energy dissipating like smoke. The room fell silent, the oppressive weight lifting. The guard and the priest collapsed, exhausted but triumphant. For a moment, it seemed as though the nightmare was over. The prison returned to its normal, eerie quiet, and the guards and prisoners began to feel a sense of relief. But the guard and the priest knew better. They had seen the depths of Fish's power, and they knew that his threat was not entirely vanquished. In the weeks that followed, the guard began to notice subtle changes in the prison. The air felt colder, the shadows seemed darker, and whispers of Fish's name could be heard at the edge of hearing. One night, as he made his rounds, he found a cryptic message scratched into the wall of Fish's former cell. "I am not gone." beware the blood moon. The guard and the priest delved into the meaning of the blood moon, discovering ancient texts that spoke of a time when the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest. They realized that Fish had planned for this, that his dark ritual was only the beginning. The blood moon was approaching, and with it, the potential for Fish's return. The two men prepared for the coming ordeal, gathering holy relics, blessed weapons, and protective charms. They reached out to experts in the occult, seeking any advantage they could find. As the blood moon drew nearer, the sense of impending doom grew stronger. The prison seemed to pulse with dark energy, the walls whispering secrets of terror and death. On the night of the blood moon, the guard and the priest stood ready in the chamber where they had first confronted Fish's spirit. The moon's eerie red light filtered through the narrow windows, casting a sinister glow over everything. The air was thick with tension, and the shadows seemed to dance with anticipation. As midnight approached, the chamber grew colder, and a familiar, chilling laugh echoed through the air. Fish's spectral form materialized, his eyes burning with a malevolent light. "Did you really think you could stop me?" he sneered. "The blood moon gives me strength. I will rise again." The guard and the priest began their chant, their voices strong and unwavering. They brandished their holy relics, the air crackling with divine energy. But Fish was more powerful than before, his form solidifying, his presence overwhelming. He advanced on them, his laughter echoing through the chamber. The battle that followed was fierce, the chamber filled with flashes of light and dark energy. The guard and the priest fought with everything they had, their chants growing louder, their relics glowing with holy light. But Fish's power was immense, his determination unyielding. As the blood moon reached its zenith, Fish let out a triumphant roar. "You cannot defeat me. I will feast on your souls." In a desperate final effort, the priest held aloft a cross blessed by the Pope himself, its light piercing through the darkness. "By the power of God, I banish you, Albert Fish." The light enveloped Fish, his form writhing and twisting as he let out a final, agonized scream. The dark energy exploded outward, shaking the very foundations of the prison. And then, silence. The guard and the priest collapsed, exhausted and battered. The chamber was quiet, the oppressive weight lifting. But they knew that the fight was far from over. Fish's spirit had been banished, but the blood moon had given him a foothold in the mortal realm. His final words echoed in their minds, a chilling reminder of the darkness that still lurked. "We have won this battle," the priest said, his voice trembling with fatigue. "But the war is far from over. Fish's evil remains. We must be vigilant." The guard nodded, his resolve hardening. "We will be ready. Whatever it takes, we will stop him." The prison returned to its eerie quiet, but the guard and the priest knew that the true horror was just beginning. The blood moon had passed, but the shadows whispered of a malevolence that refused to die. The story of Albert Fish was far from over, and the true terror lay ahead, waiting to be unleashed. The blood moon faded, and the prison returned to its eerie quiet. The guard and the priest, battered but determined, believed they had won a significant victory. The prison's oppressive atmosphere seemed to lift, and for a moment, they dared to hope that Albert Fish's reign of terror was finally over. Weeks passed without incident. The prisoners and guards resumed their routines, and the whispers of Fish's name grew quieter. The guard and the priest continued their vigil, remaining on high alert for any sign of Fish's return. They fortified the prison with blessed symbols and performed regular rituals to maintain its protection. But in the back of their minds, doubt lingered, a gnawing fear that they had not seen the last of the monster. One night, as the prison lay shrouded in darkness, the guard patrolled the empty halls. He found himself drawn to Fish's former cell, now sealed and covered in protective wards. As he approached, a chill ran down his spine. The temperature dropped, and he felt an icy breath on the back of his neck. He turned slowly, his heart pounding, but saw nothing. Ignoring his instincts, he stepped closer to the cell. He heard faint, mocking laughter, a sound that had haunted his nightmares. The guard raised his flashlight, illuminating the cell door. Carved into the wood was a new message. The blood moon was just the beginning. Suddenly, the lights in the hallway flickered and went out, plunging the prison into darkness. The guard's flashlight flickered, casting erratic shadows on the walls. Panic gripped him as he realized that the wards had failed. He tried to radio for help, but static filled the airwaves. In the chapel, the priest sensed the shift. He grabbed his crucifix and holy water, rushing toward the source of the disturbance. As he ran through the corridors, He could hear the echo of Fish's malevolent laughter growing louder. When he reached the guard, they both knew what was happening. The blood moon had given Fish more power than they had anticipated. He was breaking through the barriers they had set up. The two men made their way to the hidden chamber beneath the prison, hoping to perform one last desperate ritual to banish Fish for good. But as they descended the steps, they felt an overwhelming sense of dread. The shadows seemed to close in around them, whispering dark secrets and promises of doom. In the chamber, they began the ritual, their voices trembling but resolute. The air grew thick with tension, and the temperature dropped further. The candles flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows on the walls. As they chanted, a cold wind swept through the room, extinguishing the flames. Albert Fish materialized before them, more solid and terrifying than ever. His eyes glowed with a malevolent light, and his presence filled the room with an oppressive darkness. "You cannot stop me," he hissed. "I am eternal. Your feeble rituals mean nothing." The priest stepped forward, raising his crucifix. "By the power of God, I banish you, Albert Fish." Fish laughed, a chilling sound that echoed through the chamber. "God cannot help you here. This place is mine now." With a swift motion, Fish lashed out, knocking the priest to the ground. The guard tried to intervene, but Fish was too powerful. He felt an invisible force lift him off his feet and slam him against the wall. The impact left him dazed and gasping for breath. Fish turned his attention back to the priest, who struggled to rise. "You are nothing," Fish sneered. "Your faith is a lie." The priest, bleeding and weakened, raised his voice in a final, desperate prayer. "Lord, protect us from this evil." Fish's eyes blazed with fury. "There is no protection from me." With a swift, brutal motion, Fish drove his spectral hand into the priest's chest, his fingers closing around the man's heart. The priest let out a strangled cry as his life was drained away. The guard watched in horror as his friend collapsed, lifeless, to the floor. Fish turned to the guard, a triumphant smile on his face. "You are alone now," he said. "There is no escape." The guard, filled with a mix of terror and defiance, scrambled to his feet. He grabbed the crucifix from the priest's hand and faced Fish. "I won't let you win," he said through gritted teeth. Fish advanced, his form growing darker and more menacing. "You already have," he whispered, in a final act of desperation. The guard lunged at Fish, the crucifix held high. But Fish's spectral form enveloped him, a cold, suffocating darkness that sapped his strength and will. The guard felt his life slipping away, his vision fading as Fish's laughter filled his ears. As the guard's body crumpled to the floor, the prison was engulfed in a profound silence. The darkness receded, leaving the lifeless forms of the priest and the guard in the chamber. Albert Fish's spectral presence lingered for a moment, his eyes glowing with satisfaction. The prison fell into a deep, unearthly quiet. The guards who found the bodies the next morning whispered of a terrible evil that had been unleashed. The protective wards were shattered, the holy symbols broken. The oppressive atmosphere returned, heavier than before. In the coming weeks, more prisoners and guards reported seeing Fish's ghostly figure roaming the halls, his malevolent laughter echoing through the corridors. The prison became a place of fear and despair, haunted by the dark legacy of Albert Fish. The blood moon had passed, but the terror it unleashed remained. And deep within the prison, in the hidden chamber, the darkness whispered a chilling promise. Albert Fish would return. The cycle of horror was far from over, and the true extent of his malevolence had yet to be revealed. The shadows whispered his name, a reminder that some evils could never be truly vanquished.